Now, it's completely understandable that all the talk in the early part of this summer's transfer window is about Jeremie Frimpong, Florian Wirtz and Milos Kerkez. But I think people are maybe forgetting that Liverpool already did the first part of this summer's business nearly 12 months ago now. And I'm of course talking about the fact that he signed Giorgi Mamardashvili from Valencia. Of course, he went straight back to Valencia on a season-long loan, but we are now closing in on the time that he pulls on that liver bird for the first time. That should happen in pre-season. So I thought it was worth having a look at him because he is effectively a summer signing that's coming in. So I had a little dig into the data to see what type of goalkeeper Liverpool are getting. And of course, his arrival is all the more important because Liverpool have lost a very, very reliable and much loved really by supporters and his teammates backup goalkeeper in KELLEHER. He has completed an £18 million move to Brentford. So it's important that Mamardashvili can reach those standards. So I thought it's worth having a look at the numbers behind the player. So I'm going to start with what I think is probably, and I think we can all agree, is the key measure for any goalkeeper, and that is how good they are at keeping the ball out of the back of the net. And I think this is immediately something that Mamardashvili, quite importantly, shows up quite well. And you look a season back, so you go to the 23-24 season. Of course, this is the season that leads to Liverpool buying him, and he shows up brilliantly in the numbers for that season in particular. He was the best in La Liga, the best goalkeeper in La Liga, and the third best in all of Europe's top 5 leagues for post-shot expected goals minus goals allowed. So that's basically how many goals he was expected to concede from the shots that he faced minus the goals that he actually allowed, and that gives you a number. Did he stop more goals than would have been expected? He stopped fewer goals than would have been expected, and within those numbers you can kind of judge, is this an elite goalkeeper or not? So you look at his numbers for that, and in that season, the 23-24 season, he was 8.2 in the positive. So that means that he prevented 8.2 goals more than would have been expected from the post-shot expected goals he faced. So pretty incredible performance from him there. Now, it's worth saying, obviously, that was a clear standout season. It was very obvious after that season why Liverpool was so keen to bring him in. And that number has dipped this season, dipped quite significantly. Now, he's still plus, which I think is a positive, and that's where you kind of want to be, but it is plus 1.1. So not in that kind of incredible overperformance against expected goals that you'd seen last season. It's been a bit more of a mixed one for him this time around, but it's worth noting, I think, that goalkeepers' fortunes do go up and down. We've seen seasons of incredible overperformance from Alisson, and then seasons where he's been around the average, he's been in the just into the pluses and things like that. So this does happen to goalkeepers. It's not worth just reading too much into one season. I think you maybe take the 2 seasons as a whole, and if you look at his last 365 days, in fact, in terms of these numbers for saving shots and shots against post-shot expected goals, I bring up the graphic now, and this is in comparison to the other goalkeepers in Europe's top 5 leagues over the last 365 days. I'll save comparison to Alisson on this from maybe a bit later in the video. And when you look at these numbers, I'd say your instant impression is nothing massively jumping off the page where you're thinking, look, he's in a high percentile for that. He must be absolutely incredible at that. But I do think it's worth noting in these numbers when you look at them that clean sheet percentage and goals against are very team-affected statistics, aren't they? Let's have that right. Obviously, you're going to keep more clean sheets if you're in a team that has got Virgil van Dijk and Ibrahima Konate in front of you than if you're a team that has had a bit of a struggle and is losing a lot of games in a season. And of course, Valencia were in a relegation battle this season up until Carlos Corberán came in December and really turned things around massively for them. So it's worth remembering that when you look at those statistics. And I would say generally, you look at his overall statistics, he's 12.3 goals up against his post-shot expected goals over his entire career in La Liga. So yes, that one season of huge overperformance, but he's generally been in the, just in the overperforming anyway. So he's doing quite well in terms of that. And only one season actually in La Liga of underperformance so far, which was only minus 0.1. So he looks very good against those post-shot expected goals. Very good in terms of, as I say, just keeping the ball out of the back of the net, which is quite an important statistic. And he is, of course, only 24 years old. So to be showing that amount of promise in terms of saving goals against expected goals at such a young age for a goalkeeper, I think is incredibly promising. And one more thing I think you can see from his statistics there is that he's also pretty good at saving penalty kicks. Now, it's not really been a strength of Alisson's, let's be honest, and that puts him in the 69th percentile of all goalkeepers, the percentage of 28.6% of penalties saved. So he is impressive in that regard, and I think generally the numbers there in terms of his saves across his career thus far are fairly impressive. Now, going to move on to his command of his box now, and I do think it's worth immediately showing a comparison to Alisson here, really, because these two players show up quite differently in these numbers, but I also think it shows that this is why goalkeepers are kind of hard to compare as well, because look at the numbers there and you can see Mamardashvili is in a different league for stopping crosses compared to Alisson. I mean, he's 6'6.5" according to FB Ref, so he's got a couple of 2.5 inches, I think, on Alisson, and maybe that makes all the difference for stopping crosses. But it's also worth noting that, you know, maybe Liverpool face fewer crosses, that, you know, their fullbacks are better at cutting them out, they're maybe more dominant in possession, so they face less crosses. And also worth noting that Alisson, when those crosses come into the box, he's not much of a catcher, is he? He will tend to punch them. So is that a coaching thing that we're seeing there that's affecting those numbers? Albeit it is very impressive, I think, from Mamardashvili in terms of stopping crosses. So that is something you want him to keep up when he comes to Liverpool. And I think you can see as well from this around the command of the box here is the average distance of the defensive actions and actions outside the penalty area. Clearly from these, look at Alisson, much more proactive. He'll take a higher position. He'll be more aggressive in terms of his positioning and coming out outside the box to try and, you know, smother or kick the ball up the field. He will come outside the box, won't he, quite a lot. He's basically as a kind of last man, and that allows Liverpool to hold that high line. So we can see that's the different quality there that Alisson is showing. But again, with this, you know, so much of the data or the publicly available data around goalkeepers is a little bit dirty because we can't really tell, is this a coaching decision? We know Alisson had those qualities and maybe showed them before he came to Liverpool, but he was given the platform to do that. Is Mamardashvili being asked to be a little bit more pinned to his line? Is he asked to take a bit of a deeper position? Is the defence in front of him a little bit deeper? And is that affecting things? So that is quite hard to read, I think, really, in terms of whether that is team effects again, or it's something that Mamardashvili maybe doesn't feel comfortable coming off his line. Can he do it? Do Liverpool think he can do that as a sweeper keeper? We will have to see, and that does make it interesting. And similarly, actually, in terms of the dirtiness of the data and how difficult it is to unpick, we look at the possession statistics for both players here, and you can see length of goal kicks, 74th percentile for Mamardashvili. He's hoofing it quite a lot. The launch percentage, passes which are passes longer than 40 yards, he's in the 62nd percentile. So again, is this the manager asking him to do that? Is that a kind of thing where we're seeing that he's being asked to go long because the fullbacks or the defence centre-halves that he would be passing the ball to are maybe not trusted by the manager? Of course, with Alisson, it's very, very different. He gets to give the ball to Virgil van Dijk, to give it to Trent Alexander-Arnold when he was there. People who are incredibly comfortable in possession. So it's quite difficult, I think, to see whether, you know, Mamardashvili clearly from these numbers prefers to go long or has preferred to go long in recent seasons and get the ball up the pitch and be very, very direct with it. But we don't quite know if he can be a bit more comfortable with his feet, and that's certainly not something that you can deduce from the data. And it is worth noting, actually, that in the 23-24 season, his pass completion rate was 53%. Now this season that has jumped up to 67.8%. Is that something to do with the late change to Corberan? Has he maybe shown a bit more comfort in possession in that run of games? Not something you can necessarily see from the data, but I do think there's a clear jump there. So maybe he's not completely uncomfortable in possession. I do think that gives you a hint that he can do that and he can use the ball with his feet. And basically he's going to have to, isn't he, at the end of the day, if he's coming to Liverpool, because that is something that Arne Slot is 100% going to demand from his goalkeeper, is that he be comfortable on the ball. So we're going to have to see how he gets on in terms of that at Liverpool. Now, I will finally bring up that final comparison to Alisson here, which again I think you can see from this graphic here where they're good at one thing, where maybe the other is stronger, and I think it does again kind of underline how difficult it is to judge goalkeepers from the data. So many team affected statistics in there. I think the couple of things that we can maybe deduce from this is that Alisson is better at the moment at keeping the ball out of the net. His goalkeeping performance in terms of shot stopping is absolutely out of this world, which is not really surprised when we're talking about one of the best goalkeepers in the world, arguably the best goalkeeper in the world. And I think you can also say that Mamardashvili is definitely better at stopping crosses. And he's also better at saving penalties. Again, penalties a bit of a weakness for Alisson, so there is an improvement there. I think in terms of the possession stuff, we're maybe just going to have to wait and see until he arrives at Liverpool how he fits in. But I would say, this recruitment staff are generally the recruitment staff that picked Alisson, basically, aren't they? And, they are very good generally at kind of picking out a good fit and whether a player is capable of playing in the Liverpool system. And I also think the coaches, perhaps, even if he does have a weakness in his ability to play out from the back, will maybe believe that he can coach that out of him and make him better in possession to give Liverpool that extra man on the ball in the long term. So I guess what I'm saying really here is that I don't kind of have a convenient conclusion for you, which I think is quite nice, really. We can't know everything. The data can't tell us everything, but it can tell us some things, some areas where he's going to have to improve and get better, some areas where he is already very strong, which is probably number one priority, as I say, which is stopping shots ending up in the back of the net. And I think what I think is a good thing here is that we don't know everything in terms of how he's going to adapt and how he's going to fit into the system, but it is very much my understanding there are no plans for a second loan. He is going to come into Liverpool now and compete for his place with Alisson, effectively, I guess, take up that role as KELLEHER initially, at least, with a view on being the first choice in the long term. That is very much the idea at the moment. So that's good, I think, because it will give him time to settle. And I think when he initially comes into the club, of course, there's going to be appearances in the Cups. There's going to be moments where Alisson is injured. He does tend to pick those up, where he can bed himself in slowly. He's not coming in with huge pressure on his shoulders to immediately replace Alisson. I think that's good because any of those Cup appearances he gets, the time he gets in training while he is maybe behind Alisson, that will all be helpful in terms of allowing him to adapt and maybe learn and get better in possession or adapt to how Liverpool want to play in possession. So I think that is all really good news. So I guess, we're just going to have to see how he goes on, and pre-season will be our first glimpse of him, but I'm very much looking forward to that. And of course, he will be joined by the new signings as well, so a lot to look forward to on that front. So I'm going to wrap it up there anyway. Please do let me know, any Mamardashvili watchers out there, how much you know about the player, whether you think he will be comfortable in possession and any weaknesses in his game maybe that you've seen, and how do you think he'll do as a KELLEHER replacement in the short term. Do let me know your thoughts on that, and of course if you can drop me a like and a subscribe, it's massively appreciated, and I'll see you guys very soon.